So there's a lovely picture of Tyson's Corner in Northern Virginia. I want to point out to everybody, I've got a non-disclosure agreement with the Director of National Intelligence. And also as a part of that, I want to distance myself and note that I'm speaking in the capacity as a national security partner at Tully Rinckey. I no longer work for the DNI. I have privileged information, classified information in my head, which I cannot share. And nothing that I say in this short piece today should be attributed to the director, his or her agency, by the way, it's Avril Haines, or any of the 17 intelligence community elements. Next slide. So this slide is very important to remember. I've arranged it as sort of a clock. And if you'll notice, Guideline A, Allegiance to the United States, is at the top. And then you work through all the other guidelines, which start out with behavior and end up with technology towards the end. And basically, if you look at the guidelines as a code of conduct for you, you'll see that the first set of guidelines are about your own internal actions and things you do yourself. And then as you get later on into the guidelines, further down into the text, you're talking about your relationship with others, with IT, handling of classified information. Guideline A has not been litigated extensively since pretty much the Vietnam War. Let's go to the regulation slide. So on the regulations, I've talked about SEED 4. You should read it every year. It lays out the details of the adjudicating guidelines. The security concern is at the top of each section, and the mitigating conditions are below it. Focus on the mitigating conditions. That's what you'll have to prove if you're challenged under any regulation. And we'll talk about Guideline A, Allegiance to the United States, and what needs to be proven there. Next slide. All right, so current liabilities and assets. This slide is me reflecting on what I've seen in pretty much the last 12 months. The first thing I want to flag for everybody is the election is, I'm skipping down the mid part of the slide. The election is right around the corner. And what we're seeing is federal employees and applicants, service members, contractors, are very technically savvy now, and the barriers that used to exist to getting into trouble no longer exist. So you need to be very careful. In some respects, you surrender some of the Bill of Rights when you go into a security clearance environment. You want to be careful about extremist groups that might be tracked by the FBI. Your name could come up on a list if you've been logging into a website or clicking on a website. You want to be very careful about reposting things, okay? So you could have a Reddit account and it automatically reposts something, and something comes in that you're following and it's generated by the FSB in Russia, and they're tracking that activity. And the next thing you know is you come out on a list of federal employees who redistributed fake news from the Russians out all over the internet, and they're wondering whether you're in on the project. Okay, and you could just do that by simply having an automatic re-forwarding thing on your social media. If you're in the intelligence community, I still believe in the old rule at the CIA and the NSA, you need to get off social media. Okay, it's a nightmare for you. It's a swamp, and sooner or later you're going to end up having to justify why you're on certain sites. In other federal agencies, you can have a clearance and still be on social media. It's better to watch than to participate. You know, if you work, for instance, for like a state government, and you go out and you're posting things and you're liking things who are the opposing party to the governor, you can end up losing your job. Okay, and I don't think people understand that all of a sudden you're sending messages about yourself when you act on social media. It's social media. It's about you talking to the world. So what I like to tell people is that when you're active on the internet, it's like standing on the street corner with your boss walking by. Okay, if you would not say that in front of your boss, you probably shouldn't be posting it. Now you may say you have First Amendment rights. Yeah, yes, you have First Amendment rights, and you can go exercise your First Amendment rights, but you may be exercising that First Amendment right without a federal job or a federal contract position. So now, interesting thing, what do you want to develop in your background? This is hard for people to understand because we've had a loss of this in our society. When these rules were written 40 years ago, people were members of the Ruritan. They were members of the Aquinas. They were in Rotary. They were part of the Professional Auditors Association. They were in a church group. They were in veterans groups, the Legion, VFW. Excuse me. So community sports and youth groups is another thing that I'd love to have evidence for from my clients. You have to be involved in those groups before you get challenged on your Americanness to generate letters from people who are in those groups saying that they've interacted with you and you truly are a patriotic kind of person. It sounds corny, but it's really great evidence if you get challenged on a guideline A, but you have to be involved in your community beforehand. You just can't run out, join the Legion if you qualify, and then get a letter because you've gotten a guideline A notice from your agency security office. That means you have to be committed to living outside your house. Okay, that means you got to actually go do things in the community. And people have been doing less and less. They do more online, but online communities are one, risky, and two, don't really lead to the kind of participation that generates those kinds of declarations of support. If you need to show what you do in your off time that contributes to the strength of American community. And that's what you should be asking yourself. What 4 or 5 people am I involved with? We have baton twirling groups here in Hagerstown, Maryland, where I live, and they are in our parade every October. Anybody who's participating in helping those young people learn how to twirl batons, great evidence if you get challenged for your Americanness. That sounds corny, but many security offices have a very corny view of the United States. Church groups are fine, okay? People, and it doesn't matter whether it's a synagogue or a mosque or a Christian church or Wiccan, okay? Wiccan's approved in the executive branch as a religion. Churches show that you are part of a community. You could have some non-religious group that you're a part of, friends of the museum or something like that. But you have to develop that ahead of time. Yeah, it's a fundamental life change for many people in order to have that evidence when you need it. And that's the one area of evidence that's most lacking in guideline A investigations when I start seeing them going for adjudication. I throw this in just to remind people that if you get a clearance, you then come under the next regulation, which is seed 3. So the backwards. So seed 4 is about getting a clearance. Seed 3, the one before it, is about what you do once you have it. And that is your requirement to inform on security concerns, which means a requirement to inform on your fellow workers. That's pretty tough stuff. You often don't have to inform on yourself because the Fifth Amendment exists so you don't have to incriminate yourself. But if you know of somebody with a clearance who's doing something that's illegal, you are required to report it. You're required to narc. It's really ugly when you think about it. And there will be times when you are interviewed by security, they will ask you questions to see how committed you are to sharing information about other people's violations. And that whole belief in transparency and candor drives the spin wheel. As I developed this when I was with the intelligence community, you bring the information in regarding the concerns, security vets them, they get investigated. Most are not an issue. Most are not an issue, folks. And then that makes the unit stronger and people report, and it gets stronger because you're constantly dealing with the issues that could undermine your security profile in the office. The enemy just has to get one person in, one Ames, one Walker, one Anna Montez, right? Just get one person in, break them, right? Insert them, break the system open, get the information out. That's pretty easy. This is asymmetrical warfare for anybody who's a veteran. On the flip side, from the agency side, you have to win 100% of the time. Okay, it's a nightmare because the one time it breaks and the classified information goes out, depending on what kind of work you're doing, that's the time where you expose your operatives in a foreign country, and they end up getting rolled up and killed. Okay, that would be like a serious issue for like the CIA. Okay, on a less important issue, it could be the one time that there's a data breach and private information goes out that can be used to pressure the workforce to leak classified information, right? Embarrassing things that are held in government files go out to the enemy, and they now got a list of 40,000 federal employees they can go pressure. So security has to win 100% of the time. The enemy only has to win once or twice, and then they've created a major destabilized environment. So those are my thoughts today, Taylor. If we have questions, we have about 5 minutes. First question, how does Guideline A relate to those who have lived overseas for some time? Not such a big concern. That would be Guideline C, foreign preference, okay, which is a little different than Guideline A. So I would say it depends on what you've done while you've been overseas. If you've been overseas and you are part of radical right or left wing organizations in that foreign country, you could have a Guideline A inquiry. But if it's just living overseas, it's about where your overall investments are, where are your assets. It's a little bit of different analysis. The overseas analysis is different because security wants to know under a Guideline C whether you have a place to run and hide if you steal their stuff. So having apartments, having relatives, having bank accounts overseas is not an allegiance issue. They don't assume that you're allied with Portugal or Spain or Ireland or Italy. What they're worried about is there a haven for you to go to, right? If you steal classified information. So that's different than Guideline A, which would be, are you closely tied to a radical group in one of these foreign countries that shows that you're more tied to that country in your head than you are to the United States.